So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. It looks like a good audience for a good show tonight, and thank you all for waiting and joining me. 6:30 p.m. Pacific is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with my commentary between the clips. This week, in addition to the Sunday news shows from the regular Big Five outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, I'll also be using some quasi-news clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher and from NBC's Saturday Night Live from last night. I'll mostly be covering the big topic of the week on all the shows, which was the government shutdown and the looming default on the debt that's going to be sometime around October 17th. But I'm also going to play a few clips on the breaking news about the U.S. Special Forces raiding Somalia and Libya. But I want to start with the government shutdown and play what's my favorite clip for when you see it is pretty obvious reasons from last night's Saturday Night Live weekend update that included a winners and losers segment, which had this loser.
Loser GOP. A new Fox News poll shows that disapproval of the Republican Party during the shutdown has jumped to 59%. And that's a Fox News poll. Talk about getting booed on your home field. By the way, if Fox News says it's 59%, that's like the real news saying it's 3,000%.
So when even Fox News says Republicans are in trouble, you'd think even Republicans would realize it, but the thing is, I think the new Republican Party is a little different, and it has a little bit of a different balance between the factions. And Florida Congressman Alan Grayson was over on Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday night, and he talked about that with Bill Maher, about the different factions of the Republican Party, and I'll show you that in this clip.
I see it a little differently. I think there's really three Republican parties. There's the corporate shills, there are the religious fanatics, and then there are the freedom fiends, the ones who want to make sure that you have the right to sleep under a bridge.
So Jesus freaks, gun nuts, generic obese suburbanites, and let me add the super rich. That's the Republican Party, isn't it?
Yeah, and right now at this particular moment, the corporate shills are in the minority, and they can't force their will on the others anymore, because when you get down to it, they have the money, but the other two have the votes.
And, I think that's an important point for all my viewers who think that voters don't make a difference in politics and it's all about the money. It's important to remember that politicians have to win both the money and the votes. So voters do get their input. It's just money also gets its input with, unfair influence. But voters make a difference too. And it wasn't just on that quasi-news show that the split in the Republican Party was evident. It was also evident over on the Republican News Network, and of course I mean Fox News, where Congressman Peter King explained his split with Ted Cruz and the Tea Partiers in his answer to a question from Chris Wallace in this clip.
Let me start with you. You've said some pretty rough things about your fellow Republicans who've been pushing this default. You have called them yahoos, Ted Cruz crazies, even terrorists. With Tom Graves sitting here, it sounds like it's more than just a disagreement over policy.
No, I have a great regard for Tom Graves. I'm talking primarily about Ted Cruz here, who basically was saying that if we defunded Obamacare, he could manage to both keep the government open and defund Obamacare. The fact is, it was done in the House, and the government is now closed, and Obamacare is going forward. This was a strategy that never could work. It was almost a sort of nullification to say we're going to shut down the government if we don't defund a law that we don't like. I mean, if we want to defund something, we should repeal it, and we do it by the same way the president got it signed. Elect Republicans to both houses of Congress, repeal it, and then have a Republican president sign it. At this rate, this was a strategy doomed to failure, and Ted Cruz has now walked away from it. Now he's saying we should negotiate on the debt limit, which is what we should have been doing for the last month. That's where the real negotiation is, not on a strategy that was doomed to failure.
Now, that last part about Ted Cruz having walked away from the strategy, I don't think that's quite true, and I'll show a clip from Ted Cruz in just a minute. But I think it's important to look at the split in the Republican Party there. That's Peter King, Republican congressman from New York, over on Fox News, the Republican network, attacking another Republican. And that's, kind of one of the big problems that with this strategy, that kind of what Peter King was laying. I've shown a lot of clips from Republican Peter King, and not many of them have I agreed on. In fact, later I'm going to show Peter King in a Fox News bias clip I'm going to play on the Navy SEAL raids in Somalia and Libya. But at least on this one subject, there are actually people in the Republican Party and on Fox News who are recognizing that what Ted Cruz did is not good for them. And I don't normally play clips from pundits, just new people who are commenting, because it's kind of me meta commenting on the commenters. But I want to show Dana Milbank, who's a journalist who I really respect, and I want to show a comment he made about that even goes farther about Ted Cruz and his strategy. Not that it was just a failure, but there's something disingenuous about it. Anyway, I'll show you that clip here.
Talk to me about Ted Cruz. This is really unusual in this town that's built on seniority, where you have a freshman senator who's not only emerged as the leader of this in the Senate, but is actually leading the House Republicans sometimes against their own leader.
And more than that, he's a complete phony. I met Ted Cruz 15 years ago. He wasn't some Tea Party guy. He was an ambitious kid working for the Bush campaign, Ivy League debater, and basically what he saw is, hey, Sarah Palin can do that in 2010. I can ride this Tea Party. I can take it to town, and I can get really famous really fast. He's absolutely right. He's a real smart guy. He's playing this game very well.
So yeah, that is, I think, if I were to give my opinion what Ted Cruz is doing, I think it would be very close to what Dana Milbank said. That another guest, if you down in the video description below me, you can find links to all the full episodes of pretty much everything I'm using. HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, you can't find the full episode on the HBO site, but you can find the whole Saturday Night Live episode, and you can find all these other news shows that I'm taking clips from. And you'll see that another guy, whose name I can't remember, after Dana Milbank went on to comment about how Ted Cruz is kind of a political genius, that he found this, how the new politics doesn't depend on the leadership, it depends on grassroots and, making provocative statements. And it's kind of an extension of what Dana Milbank there said about Ted Cruz following the Sarah Palin model, and I think that's true. But I also wanted to show Ted Cruz himself. I showed a bunch of clips of him last week. I want to show one clip. He was on one show, CNN's State of the Union, with Candy Crawley, and he was talking about his transition from the continuing resolution fight, the government shutdown, where he engineered this whole set of bills in the House. Even though he's in the Senate, he had these conservative Republican congressmen go against the leadership and pass these resolutions in the House that would only fund the government if the Senate and President Obama agreed to get rid of Obamacare or defund it and then delay it for a year. And anyway, and that so far hasn't worked, but now it's getting into this debt ceiling debate, where on October 17th, the United States might run out of money, and I'll play some more clips on the specifics about that. But I want to show how Ted Cruz is transitioning or not transitioning his Obamacare demands over to the debt ceiling deadline when he was answering a question from CNN's Candy Crowley here.
Look, in my view, the debt ceiling, we should look for three things. Number one, we should look for some significant structural plan to reduce government spending. Number two, we should avoid new taxes. And number three, we should look for ways to mitigate the harms from Obamacare. Since 1978, the debt ceiling has been raised 55 times.
Just so so you think that some facet of the president's health care plan should be attached to an increase in the debt ceiling?
The debt ceiling historically has been among the best leverage that Congress has to rein in the executive.
So yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And what else?
But my point is that there's great historical precedent. Since 1978, we've raised the debt ceiling 55 times. A majority of those times, 28 times, Congress has attached very specific and stringent requirements. Many of the most significant spending restraints, things like Graham-Rudman, things like sequestration, came through the debt ceiling. And so the president's demand, jack up the nation's credit card with no limits, no constraints, it's not a reasonable demand.
How?
So yeah, that you can see both Ted Cruz there say that he is going to continue insisting on some defunding or delaying of Obamacare as part of this debt ceiling negotiation. And you can also hear him say, put forth this Republican talking point about how the debt ceiling has always been tied to various things. And there is some truth to that. There have been negotiations around the debt ceiling, but never really going right up to default until 2011. And I want to show you Treasury Secretary Jack Lew from the Obama administration, who knows the most about what's going to happen with the default. He made the rounds of various shows, including over on Fox News Sunday, where Chris Wallace went through a couple different questions. I'm not going to show the beginning of it, but Chris Wallace listed various things that had been added to the debt ceiling and negotiations in the past. But I'll show you where Chris Wallace kind of undercuts his own point when Secretary Jack Lew is saying that this time it's different, or these Republicans are different in this clip.
It's different. And frankly, I think your history is wrong. If you look at the cases where the debt limit was involved, there were many other things attached to the debt limit, but the question of threatening to cause a default of the United States, not until 2011 did it become a positive agenda.
Mr. Secretary, your history, with all due respect, your history is wrong. In 1973, Democrats in the Senate, including Ted Kennedy and Walter Mondale, wanted to attach campaign finance reform under Richard Nixon during Watergate to raising the debt limit. It ended up being a filibuster. Republicans had to filibuster to defeat it and take it out. This has happened over and over again, and presidents have negotiated. And this president, what's unprecedented is he's refusing to negotiate.
You know, Chris, I lived through the budget debates of the 1980s, the 1990s, the early 2000s. I know that there were many occasions when the debt limit was tacked on to other things. I actually remember when the debt limit was used as a deadline, an action-forcing event. It was different in 2011. In 2011, you had 50 to 100 members of the House who said if we don't get our way, we would rather see the default of the United States, and that was different. It was different. And I think what the president is saying is Congress has to do its job. It has to open the government. It has to make it so we can pay our bills.
But you're moving
and
the
then
goal
we
line.
need to
John
sit
Boehner
down
says
and
he
we need to
doesn't want
negotiate.
a default, sir.
So yeah, there you can see the argument from the Treasury Secretary about why what the Republicans are doing now is different. I'm sorry, I think the volume went up at the end of that clip a little bit, but I also want to show you that John Boehner, the Republican Speaker of the House, was over on, let me see here, I got to load up the next three clips as here we are. John Boehner actually gave an interview over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, the ABC show, and he addressed that history that Jack Lew was just talking about whether presidents in the past have negotiated on the debt limit, and he also seemed to make it pretty clear that he is not going to pass what they call a clean debt limit, which means a debt limit that doesn't have any conditions attached to it. And I want to show you, the president said he's not going to negotiate, and so I want to show you John Boehner also saying he's not going to negotiate it, or he's not going to pass a clean debt limit, and also saying there aren't the votes, which I'm not sure is true. But anyway, I'll show you that clip from This Week with George Stephanopoulos here.
The debt limit is right around the corner. President saying, I won't negotiate. I won't have a conversation. Even though President Reagan negotiated with Democrats who controlled the Congress back then, even though President George Herbert Walker Bush had a conversation about raising the debt limit. During the Clinton administration, there were 3 fights over the debt limit. You and I participated in several of those. And even President Obama himself in 2011 went through a negotiation. Now he's saying, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to tell you what, George, the nation's credit is at risk because of the administration's refusal to sit down and have a conversation.
They're saying it's at risk because of your refusal to pass a clean debt limit. There have been some reports.
We are not going to pass a clean debt limit increase.
Under no
I told the
circumstances?
president, there's no way we're going to pass when the votes are not in the House to pass a clean debt limit. And the president is risking default by not having a conversation with us.
So under no circumstances will you pass a clean debt limit?
We are not going down that path. It is time to deal with America's problems.
So there he says they're not going down that path. They're not going to pass a clean debt limit increase. And this is like the first time I've started to think that it's possible the United States might default. And it was kind of re-emphasized by about what path we're on. This is what Speaker of the House John Boehner said a little bit later in this clip.
Putting our nation
So are you saying
at risk
that
of
if he
default.
continues to refuse to negotiate, the country is going to default?
It's the path we're on. Listen, the president canceled his trip to Asia. I assumed, well, maybe he wants to have a conversation. I decided to stay here in Washington this weekend. He knows what my phone number is. All he has to do is call.
Now, the problem with the kind of talking points that John Boehner's trying to put out there, I think, in addition to what he said about there not being the votes for a clean debt limit increase, I'm not sure about that, but what he said about he's just waiting for a call is that, months ago, I think there's been reported a lot of places that John Boehner and Harry Reid worked out a deal, because they both, the House and the Senate both passed budgets, and apparently Harry Reid and the Democratic leader of the Senate and John Boehner there, the Republican leader of the House, had worked out a deal where they'd come down like $70 billion from, I think the two budgets were like $90 billion apart, and that they would come down $70 billion in exchange for a clean debt limit increase. And you can see George Stephanopoulos asking John Boehner about that, and he pretty much confirms it in the way he answers in this clip.
He said it publicly on many occasions that you came to him back in July and offered to pass a clean government funding resolution, no Obamacare amendments, that was $70 billion below what the Senate wanted. They accepted it, and now you've reneged on that offer.
No, clearly there was a conversation about doing this.
Several conversations.
Several. But
and you offered a clean resolution.
But I and my members decided that the threat of Obamacare and what was happening was so important that it was time for us to take a stand, and we took a stand.
Did you decide it, or was it decided for you?
No, I, and working with my members, decided to do this in a unified way. George, I have 233 Republicans in the House, and you've never seen a more dedicated group of people who are thoroughly concerned about the future of our country. They believe that Obamacare, all these regulations coming out of the administration, are threatening the future for our kids and our grandkids, and it's time for us to stand and fight.
Mr. Speaker.
So yeah, there is John Boehner basically saying he didn't really deny anything that George Stephanopoulos said about how he had made a deal and then reneged on the deal. He just talked about the needs of the American people, or whatever it was he was trying to say there. But I also want to play one last clip from John Boehner, where he denies that he has the votes in the Congress to pass what's called a clean continuing resolution. I'm just loading up the next 3 clips here real quick. And what that means is right now the House of Representatives keeps passing these bills now they're doing these bills to pass just little parts of the government, but before they were passed, they said they would continue funding the government first as long as Obamacare was defunded, and then delayed, and now they're saying delay the individual mandate. And the thing is that if John Boehner were to allow a clean continuing resolution just to fund the government to come to the floor, there would be all the Democrats and then enough Republicans probably so that that bill would pass. But of course John Boehner won't let that come to the floor. But and when George Stephanopoulos asked him about it, he actually denied there were enough votes, and I want to show you that clip here.
Not prepared to schedule a clean vote on government funding right now.
There are not the votes in the House to pass a clean CR.
Are you sure that's true? The Democrats say they have 195 Democrats who've already signed a letter saying that they would vote for it. 21 House Republicans have said they are for it as well, and Democrats are confident you add those Republicans to the Democrats, a few more would come along, and they have the votes.
The American people expect in Washington, when we have a crisis like this, that the leaders will sit down and have a conversation. And I told my members the other day, there may be a back room somewhere, but there's nobody in it. We're interested in having a conversation about how we open the government and how we begin to pay our bills. But it begins with a simple conversation.
Well, you had a conversation at the...
So yeah, there's John Boehner saying he's waiting to have the conversation, but also saying that there aren't the votes in the House of Representatives to pass a continuing resolution without these conditions. And Bob Schieffer on CBS's Face the Nation asked Treasury Secretary Jack Lew, who was also over on that show, to react to what John Boehner had said, because that show, I guess, tapes after This Week with George Stephanopoulos, so he actually asked him to respond to a couple things that John Boehner said, and here's what Treasury Secretary Jack Lew said about that.
Past one another. In that interview, he also said the votes are not there to pass a clean resolution.
Why doesn't he put it on the floor and give it a chance? You know, I worked for a speaker for 8 years. I worked for Speaker O'Neill, who believed deeply that the one thing the American people won't tolerate is obstructionism. He put things on the floor, and sometimes he won and sometimes he lost. But that's the right thing to do. Let the Congress vote.
But is there any way, is there some kind of...
Oh, sorry. So there, yeah, that's Jack Lew saying that basically disagreeing with John Boehner. And, you know, I guess the only way to know for sure is to put it on the floor. But if, you know, what he's doing is he's following what's called the Hastert rule that says that he won't put any bill up for vote in the House of Representatives unless it has a majority of the majority, which means it has to have a majority of the Republicans. And because the House is split pretty closely, that means that a minority of the House is controlling the entire U.S. government and creating a shutdown. But, you know, some people are saying it's not really John Boehner's fault, that, you know, it's kind of impossible for him to control these Tea Party Republicans in the House of Representatives. You know, 50 or 100 of his members are, you know, kind of unreasonable. And I wanted to show you a clip about that from last night's Saturday Night Live. Seth Meyers, this is at the beginning of the winners and losers segment that I showed a clip from a minute ago, right here.
To help you understand it all, it's time for Winners and Losers. Loser, John Boehner. I feel sorry for you, buddy. It's exhausting watching you try to maintain your dignity while wrangling those Tea Party maniacs. You're like Seinfeld if there were 30 Kramers.
So I don't know if that is makes it more. I've heard, you know, that trying to get things organized in the Senate is like herding cats, and I don't know, maybe it's 30 Kramers is. I guess that's kind of an amusing analogy. I just wanted to play that clip. It's not as great as the Fox News bashing clip I played from Seth Meyers earlier. But you know, I didn't find as many clips of like the back and forth on what was happening in this negotiation. Not as, you know, in some ways you could actually just go back to my LiberalViewer Sunday clip roundup from last Sunday and watch what they were saying then, because there hasn't really been a lot of movement. I mean, the only real movement has been the movement of time, where now the government's been shut down for like 6 days, and October 17th is when the debt ceiling, when the U.S. May begin defaulting on its debt, which I'll explain in a minute. But I wanted to show this one really insightful comment from Gwen Ifill. I know it's another clip from a commentator, but I thought it was insightful enough to play as to why there hasn't been a lot of movement, and why they're kind of talking past each other. And anyway, I'll play that clip here.
An electoral consequence. But Bob, I want to congratulate you for chasing Jack Lew and John Cornyn around the table to try to get them to say something this morning, because clearly the reason why they had very little to say that moved the ball is because very little is happening. They're out of town. There are no secret meetings going on. I think Boehner said on another network this morning that there was a back room, but nobody was in it. And so this idea of punting, I think, is the best possible outcome. And how sad is that? I think they're all hoping for external, whether it's Wall Street revolting, whether it's the American public opinion polls sliding. They're looking for something else to force them to do the jobs that they each agree that the others should be doing.
But isn't what's
So yeah, I think that's why it is that we haven't seen a lot of movement, and why there's all this game playing going on, and there's even game playing about the game playing. There was I guess the Wall Street Journal quoted some unnamed White House official saying that they weren't going to do anything because they thought they were winning, and then Speaker John Boehner came out in a press conference and said, this isn't a damn game, and then Senator Rand Paul was caught on this open mic talking to Mitch McConnell, saying that, he thought they might win this thing if they kept their messaging right and kept using words like obstructionism, because the no negotiation strategy wasn't playing well in the press. And anyway, I want to show from Meet the Press, NBC, David Gregory wasn't there this week. It was Savannah Guthrie, and she kind of confronted Senator Rand Paul, who was a guest, with all of that, including his open mic comment with Mitch McConnell, and I want to show his sort of non-answer in this clip.
This week, the Wall Street Journal quoted a senior White House official who said, "We don't care how long this shutdown lasts, we're winning." That infuriated Speaker Boehner. Take a look.
I get the Wall Street Journal out, and it says, well, we don't care how long this lasts because we're winning. Well, this isn't some damn game.
All right, and then here you are caught on an open mic with Senator Mitch McConnell a little bit earlier this week. Take a listen.
I think if we keep saying we wanted to defund it, we fought for that, but now we're willing to compromise on this, I think they can't, and we're going to win. I know we don't want to be here, but we're going to win this, I think.
Senator, I brought those two things up side by side for a reason. Winning, losing, battle of the talking points, dueling cable appearances. Do you in Washington, do all of you have any idea how totally disgusted the American people are with these antics?
Yeah, no, I think these are all legitimate concerns, and I think really we should point back to where the root of the problem is. The root of the problem here is that we are not passing appropriation bills like we should. We have 12 different appropriation bills. We should pass them one at a time. Government should never shut down if we're doing our job appropriately. So really what we need to be saying is, why are we not passing spending bills the way we should do it?
So yeah, that didn't really answer the whole open mic gamesmanship question that Savannah Guthrie asked there, but anyway, that's kind of where they are and what's happening. But the big thing that may be changing the dynamic is this debt ceiling limit that's coming up October 17th, or supposedly we actually reached the debt limit last May. But anyway, I want to show you Treasury Secretary Jack Lew was on several different shows, and since he controls the Treasury, that's his job. He is the one sort of most involved into when this default would actually happen, and I want to show him kind of explaining how the debt ceiling gets reached and default happens over in this clip.
We actually hit the debt limit in May. From May until this week, we've been using what are called extraordinary measures to create a bit of additional headroom. On Tuesday, I informed Congress that I had used the final extraordinary measures. There are no more. So we're now limited to the borrowing capacity that we have today. On October 17th, we will exhaust our borrowing capacity. And at that point, I have nothing else in the drawer.
Does that mean default happens that same day?
Means on October 17th, we're left with the cash on hand. And I've told Congress that I believe that there will be approximately $30 billion of cash on hand, which is a lot of money, and it sounds like a lot of money to the American people. But you have to put it in the context of the cash flow of the United States. We are $4 trillion enterprise, and on any individual day you could be $50 or $60 billion cash flow negative or positive. $30 billion is a dangerously low level of cash, and we're on the verge of going into a place we've never been, not having cash to pay our bills.
I guess.
So yeah, I guess that's the real default, or what's going to happen coming up is the United States not being able to pay its bills, and you know, I think one of the scariest parts about this is that there are people on the Republican side who are kind of claiming that it's not going to happen. That's one of the reasons that makes me think that they're going to go past this deadline. And I want to show Senator Rand Paul back over on Meet the Press with Savannah Guthrie. I'm just loading up the next 3 clips here real quick. Explaining sort of this Republican position that the debt ceiling limit isn't really a limit because we could actually pay the interest on our debt even if we can't pay other bills. That's kind of the argument over in this clip.
I think it's irresponsible of the president and his men to even talk about default. There's no reason for us to default. We bring in $250 billion in taxes every month. Our interest payment is $20 billion. Tell me why we would ever default. We have legislation called the Full Faith and Credit Act, and it tells the president you must pay the interest on the debt. So this is a game. This is kind of like closing the World War II memorial. They all get out on TV and they say, oh, we're going to default. They're the ones scaring the marketplace.
But sir,
we
even if
scare the marketplace, we should never default.
Let's say your plan works and you can pay the interest on the debt and you don't have a technical default. Wouldn't there be dramatic consequences on the economy anyway? It may not be the letter of the default, but the spirit of it.
Yeah, but look at what happened in 2011. Our credit rating was downgraded. But you know why? The reasoning they gave was because we have too much debt, that we weren't cutting enough spending, and so they downgraded us. It has to do with the big picture of how much debt we're accumulating. It isn't so much these deadlines that the market's worried about. The market's also worried about a $17 trillion debt and that we're not acting fiscally responsibly, and we're spending more money than we bring in. That's what the market's worried about.
Senator.
Now that last part about what the market's really worried about is our debt, well, that's partially true. That's part of the reason we got downgraded, but part of the reason we got downgraded is because they weren't negotiating and because that the Republicans refused to consider any revenue increases. But that whole thing about how if we can pay off the interest on our debt, that means we don't technically default. That we should start like picking and choosing what bills we pay. I mean, that is just, you know, that's a ridiculous point of view for how the United States should run its business or its pay off, you know, the Treasury. And I want to show Treasury Secretary Jack Lew over on CNN's State of the Union. This is kind of the longest clip, I think, of the night, but he explains why it is that that is a ridiculous position over in this clip.
Could you keep up on servicing the debt, that is, paying the interest on the U.S. debt, therefore not defaulting, as you've been talking about?
If the United States government, for the first time in its history, chooses not to pay its bills on time, we will be in default. There is no option that prevents us from being in default if we don't have enough cash to pay our bills.
But very often in bills, and correct me if I'm wrong, can you not pay the interest? I'm just trying to figure out wiggle room, because what Republicans are saying is these guys do this all the time as we run up. Look at Wall Street. It's kind of looking at it going, this doesn't seem to be that big a deal to us this time around. No one's been threatening to downgrade the U.S. credit worthiness. So the question is it true, as they say, that you could service the debt beyond the 17th?
Candy, let me put this in context. We are the strongest, most important economy in the world. We've already seen that with the government shutdown, the kinds of gridlock and brinksmanship in Washington hurts people and it hurts the economy. We saw in 2011 what happened as we approached the point of breaching the debt limit. You now have people who are saying, oh, it won't be that bad. Well, I challenge them to answer the questions that I asked you. They're willing to concede if we don't pay interest and principal on the debt that that's bad. Well, you know, it is bad, but there are a lot of things that are bad. You can't pay all the bills if Congress doesn't raise the debt ceiling. And none of these bills are new. These are commitments that Congress made. It's paying old bills. It would be like somebody saying, I ran out my credit card and I decided not to pay it. You can't do that. The United States government is just too important to the world. Our currency is the world's reserve currency.
So, yeah, I think that explains why Senator Rand Paul is not correct about how if we just pay off the interest on, that's like saying if you just pay off the interest, you know, you make the minimum payment on the credit card. Well, it's not even the minimum payment because it's like choosing between your bills. It's like you pay off the bills that have penalties, but other people, they're just out of luck. They're not going to get paid. I don't know. Maybe I'm not making good analogies, but I just don't think that there are going to be no consequences if the United States becomes like a deadbeat and doesn't pay off its bills on time. Even if it does end up paying the interest on the debt. And I want to show one more clip. Senator Chuck Schumer was over on, I think it was over on, This Week with George Stephanopoulos. He was explaining why he thought that they couldn't negotiate. And I think actually they may end up, like the no negotiation position that the White House has put out is actually a negotiating position possibly. And I heard some people say that on the shows. But here's Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer explaining why he thinks the president can't negotiate in this clip.
Mr. Senator, that the Speaker is going to blink, that the House Republicans are going to blink. But if they do not, then what happens on October 17th? Is it really preferable to have all those consequences of default than to have a negotiation?
Well, the kind of negotiation you have is one with a gun held to your head, and you just can't do it, and it'll lead to a future negotiation like that and a future one. If you go for this kind of hostage-taking once, and the president did in 2011, it doesn't go away. It comes back worse and worse and worse, and the whole full faith and credit in the United States currency and the United States dollar goes down the drain. The damage is far greater than the damage that Speaker Boehner seeks to undo by somewhat reducing the budget deficit. And we're willing to talk to him about budget deficit. Leader Reid already gave him his budget number when we talked about the resolution about funding the government. We gave in to his number. And then he said Obamacare. He keeps throwing different things at the wall, and we know the reason why. Ted Cruz and the hard-right Republicans are holding him hostage, in effect, and right up to now, he hasn't had the courage or strength to resist them. Sooner or later, he'll be forced to, particularly on the debt ceiling, because the business community, which still has some weight with mainstream Republicans, if not the Tea Party, will put huge clout on him. And as we get closer, the blame will fall on Speaker Boehner and the Republican Party for this upcoming disaster.
That could go on.
They'll
So I don't know. The Chuck Schumer thinks that they're going to have to negotiate. That's what I think I cut off at the end where saying they're going to have to negotiate. But remember that other clip I played previously about how the corporate interests don't have as much sway on this current Republican Party. There are these like Tea Party people who they don't really care if the economy. They'd rather tank the economy than have Obamacare go into effect, and they're not going to, if Wall Street gets all upset, they're not necessarily going to listen. And the other thing about this whole Tea Party strategy I wanted to point out is it not only doesn't seem to be working in terms of getting what they wanted, but it really they shot themselves in the foot on the whole Obamacare issue, because I think that eventually Obamacare is going to be a positive, and once it gets working, people are going to like some of the things they get from it. But there were a lot of glitches in the rollout, and I'm just, hold on a sec while I load up the next 3 clips here real quick. And the thing is that because of the whole shutdown, they didn't really get much media coverage. Of course, over on Fox News they did, but even that would they would cover it even if they didn't exist, I guess. But I want to show you this clip of Savannah Guthrie on NBC's Meet the Press asking Senator Rand Paul whether they kind of stepped on their own message, and then Rand Paul doesn't really answer the question, but anyway, here it is.
And yet, all the headlines are about the government shutdown. Let me show you actually the front page of the Lexington paper, and you'll see the top headline says, "Feeling the Shutdown," and there, buried below the fold, talks about the healthcare glitches with the Obamacare rollout. Did Republicans make a strategic error by, instead of just letting this law go into effect and let the chips fall, let people really experience it and find out if it's as bad as you say, instead shutting down the government, and now that's the subject?
You know, it's always difficult to make decisions, but most of us, ran for office. I ran for office because I was concerned about the overwhelming debt that our country's accruing. $1 trillion a year. We're borrowing $1 million every minute. So I'm worried about the overall financial picture of the country. And so whether or not it was a good strategic idea, I don't know, but when are we supposed to stand up and say, look, we're out of money and we're destroying this country by this burden of debt? And so I think you've got to stand up, whether it's debt ceiling or whether it's continuing resolution. We have to talk about the big picture, and the big picture is not an immediate default. The big picture is this gradual bankruptcy that's occurring of this country.
All right.
So yeah, you notice there that by the end you can't even remember what the question was that Savannah Guthrie asked, because Rand Paul's answer, I mean, he's not the only politician who does that, but I think the question was kind of more interesting than the answer, about how Republicans stepped on possible bad stories about Obamacare by making the government shut down this whole big issue. And I want to show you one more clip from last Friday night's HBO Real Time with Bill Maher, where Bill Maher kind of talked about some of the problems with the Obamacare rollout. And anyway, here's that clip.
Obamacare is real. As of Tuesday, people went on the exchanges. Unfortunately, they didn't work. This thing crashes so frequently, they're starting to call it Lindsay Lohan care. One woman was having so much trouble logging on that finally the NSA guy who was spying on her broke in and said, "Hit Control-Alt-Delete." Sad.
I like that. Even though I think Obamacare is eventually going to be successful, I liked Bill Maher covering some of the glitches, and I like that NSA joke, so I thought I'd play that for you all. So that's most of the shutdown clips I want to show you, but I want to show you a couple more clips about the shutdown, just sort of in the Fox News world. I did show that Fox News did have Representative Pete King on sort of attacking Ted Cruz and Ted Cruz's strategy. So at least they had the Republican on Republican debate, but that isn't really that balanced a debate. I mean, they did have Jack Lew on, but when it came to who was going to be debated, or who was going to be debating the shutdown strategy, I thought it was kind of amusing in the intro. Here's how Fox News framed the debate on the shutdown.
Then Republicans debate the way out of this standoff. We'll talk with Tom Graves of Georgia, who's leading the charge against Obamacare, and Pete King of New York, who says the right wing has hijacked the GOP.
So yeah, that's what passes for debate on Fox News, is a debate between moderate Republican, although he actually denied being a moderate when he was almost called a moderate by Fox News, or less conservative Republican Peter King, and then the Tea Party Republican, who I'm not going to show any clips from him, but let me just add in the next 3 clips here real quick, where I want to show also this thing. I said that at least Fox News did have Secretary of the Treasury Jack Lew on and asked him a bunch of questions. So there was that, but so it wasn't all Republicans all the time on the Republican News Network. But I did want to show how first, when Chris Wallace, after he had Jack Lew on, he played this one clip of Jack Lew and then summarized what he supposedly said. Let me see if I... when after his Jack Lew interview, he had a discussion with his panelists, and he totally mis-summarized what Jack Lew said, and I'll show you that clip here.
Will the president negotiate on that as part of a deal to deal with the debt limit and the shutdown?
Chris, we need to separate the issues.
Why?
Congress
Why?
needs
It
to
hasn't
open
been
the government.
separated for
Congress needs
years.
to open the government. We're now going into the second week of a government shutdown. It's causing real damage to the American people.
Treasury Secretary Jack Lew earlier this morning on the president's refusal to negotiate with Republicans.
Now, why I find that so amusing and why I'm saying he's mis-summarizing what Jack Lew said is after he had that little exchange with Jack Lew earlier this morning, he actually said to Jack Lew, well, should I take from this conversation that the president's refusing to negotiate? And Jack Lew said no. And I mean, that's the thing. If any of these politicians, if you ask them, are you for a shutdown, they all say no. But anyway, here's what Jack Lew actually said when Chris Wallace summarized the position of the president incorrectly, and this isn't a clip that he played.
I take away from this conversation that even though Republicans are willing to talk about a debt deal or a short-term extension, it's the president who is digging his feet into the ground and saying no negotiations.
Chris, that is not what I said. What I said is Congress.
What are you saying? It sounds like you want unconditional surrender and nothing else,
Congress needs to do
sir.
its job. We've just spent the last several months with Congress creating this ridiculous choice where either you repeal the Affordable Care Act or you shut down the government or default on the United States. That is not the way we should do business. They need to do their job. They need to open the government. They need to fund our ability to pay our bills. These are old bills, Chris. These aren't new bills.
I understand that, sir.
And then we are open to negotiation. The president has been, is, and will always be open to reasonable discussions.
I want to ask you about Obama.
So yeah, there you can see that's how Jack Lew responded to Chris Wallace when he was incorrectly summarizing his position, and the president's position is no negotiation. But then after the interview, when it came time for the panel discussion, that is not how it was summarized. So anyway, those are the couple dozen clips I wanted to play for you on the government shutdown, or I think it ended up being like 23 clips. But before I look in the discussion section, and I'm glad to see it looks like I got 120 viewers, something like that today, which is nice to see. Before I get to that, I want to play you a few clips on Sandy. I want to play you a few clips on this breaking news about these two raids that U.S. Special Forces engaged in Somalia and Libya this morning or last night. I'm not sure exactly what the time was, but first I'll show you this clip from the CBS National Security or Terror. I can't remember his exact title, but I think his name is David Martin, and he works for CBS, and he explains the two different raids that took place this morning in this clip.
Two separate operations in two separate countries, both in Africa. In Libya, U.S. commandos snatched one of the FBI's most wanted terrorists off the streets of Tripoli in broad daylight, and he is now in U.S. custody, probably on a ship in the Mediterranean. This guy's name was Abu Anas al-Libi. He was wanted for his role in the 1998 bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. He was also one of the original members of al-Qaeda, and one of the few still at large, but he will now, after he's interrogated, be brought back to the United States and almost certainly stand trial in New York City.
This was a big get.
This was a big get, and it was a risky get because you were going into a major metropolitan area. The other operation, the one in Somalia, was conducted by U.S. Navy SEALs, and it appears not to have been as successful. They were out to capture a senior leader of al-shabaab, the group which was responsible for that shopping mall massacre in Nairobi 2 weeks ago. They got caught in a firefight before they could capture the guy, and had to withdraw to avoid another Black Hawk Down situation. And in withdrawing, they were not sure what became of the leader they were after, whether he was killed, wounded, or simply got away.
So yeah, I guess those are the two news events, or the two raids that the Navy SEALs, U.S. Special Forces. There was one in Libya where they picked up this guy, Abu Anas al-Libi, who is a longtime Al-Qaeda operative. He was responsible for the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings, or not solely responsible, but he was one of the people responsible for the bombings of the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998, and he's like an old-time Al-Qaeda operative. In fact, here, let me load up the next 3 clips here real quick. The first one is Michael Leiter, who is the NBC counterterrorism analyst, and he also worked counterterrorism in both, I think it was the Clinton and Bush administrations. And hold on real quick here. Load up the last 3 clips here. He explained the importance of getting this guy Abu Anas al-Libi in the raid. He was the successful raid in Libya, and he explained that here.
I think he's very significant, both for his historical role in the 1998 bombings, but he's one of the Al-Qaeda originals. He was with bin Laden in '94 in Sudan. This is someone who had moved from Iran back to Libya, and his experience, his deep ties to the organization, his capture now means it's much harder for Al-Qaeda to establish a really senior leadership presence in Libya, and that's critical for the United States.
But it certainly shows that Libya is a place of interest, of a place that's largely lawless at times.
It is. That's the problematic piece here. That he felt safer going from Iran to Libya now is very worrisome for the U.S.
Let's talk.
Yeah, so that's why it's important that they've captured this guy. He's a big Al-Qaeda operative, and I'm sure they're getting intelligence from him. And that was the successful raid in Libya to get this guy. But then there was also this raid in Somalia for the al-shabaab people who were responsible for this Nairobi, Kenya mall attack that I showed clips from a couple weeks back. And that one was not quite as successful, and I want to show Martha Raddatz, who's the I can't remember what her current title is like global affairs correspondent, but she has a lot of good sources in the Department of Defense, and she talked about the problems they had in the other raid, the one in Somalia, in this clip.
They cannot confirm the target was dead. We don't know who the target was, but this was SEAL Team 6 going in on a raid in Somalia, south of Mogadishu. They came in from the Indian Ocean. They approached this seaside home of this target, an al-shabaab target, opened fire, but they met much, much more resistance than they thought they would, so they had to withdraw. The SEALs withdrew. They didn't know who was in there at the time. They can't confirm it yet. They'll start talking to human intelligence.
And the hope was...
So yeah, that is the less successful SEAL team raid there. Though I heard some talk that the other raid might have been Delta Force. I'm not sure whether it was all SEAL team. That was SEAL Team 6, and I heard from one place it was SEAL team in Libya also, but then I heard from another source it might have actually been the Army Delta Force. But that was, and of course I want to show you one more Fox News bias clip. Peter King, who I showed saying some reasonable things about the Tea Party, Ted Cruz failed strategy on the debt limit and the government shutdown. He was over on Fox News, and since he is on the House Intelligence Committee, he was there to score, talking about giving credit to, of course, our special forces and the FBI, never really giving credit to President Obama, and then using it to make a couple points on trying people on Guantanamo and, of course, Benghazi. You never have a Fox News Sunday or any Fox News program without, or especially if it involves something happening in Libya, without mentioning Benghazi. And so I want to show you that as the final clip here.
Chris, I can't comment on whether or not we captured the al-shabaab leader in Somalia. Having said that, it was a daring raid. I give our special forces, special operators, tremendous credit. I think we have to, after it is over, find out did al-shabaab have any advance notice we were coming? Because obviously there was a heavy resistance when we got there. As far as Libya is concerned, Libya has been wanted for 15 years. I wish he was being tried in Guantanamo rather than the Southern District of New York. And I also raised the question, though, why, if we were able to get al-Libya, we didn't get the operatives from Benghazi, who we know where they are, and they've been almost open and notorious now for quite a while. You know, why we don't go in and get them as well. And that's been a real issue, I know, by a number of us in the Congress, why we don't go after those who carried out Benghazi. But al-Libya is a great capture, and I give our Navy SEALs and our Special Forces and FBI operatives tremendous credit. But again, I hope he's interrogated for a long time before he's brought to court anyway.
All right.
Yeah, I guess he didn't say, I hope Obama doesn't give him his Miranda rights, but they were all like the Republican talking points there about, since something happened in Libya, how come we can't get the people from Benghazi, and why can't we try them at Gitmo, and and he did give credit there to the FBI and to our special forces, but of course not the Obama administration. Those are all the clips I want to show you on my LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup. But I do want to spend a little time looking at all of you who are watching in the discussion section. I really appreciate it. It looks like I have about 120 people watching now. So if I can get a little live discussion going. I noticed before I even started, before the program began, I had a question here. Which was a question from Simiols asked, do you still think Obama is playing 3D chess with the government shutdown? Do you think the GOP will blink first and pass a clean CR, or will they wait for Obama and the Democrats to offer a concession? That is definitely an on-topic question, even though it came before I showed any of the clips. And, I don't know whether he's playing 3D chess or not, but as I said in my shows the last couple of weeks, I do think that that before this whole blunder by the Republican Party, the chances of the Democrats winning back the House of Representatives in the 2014 elections was almost zero. And it's still not all that great, but their best chance for winning back the House is for the Republicans to shut down the government or even default on the debt. I mean, I'm hoping, just because that would have like big negative consequences on the economy, that there's not going to be an actual debt default. But the farther that the crazies in the Republican Party go and do all these things that the American people don't want them to do, that's what gives President Obama the possibility of having his last 2 years in the presidency be with Democratic control of both houses of Congress. And whether there's some big 3D chess game going on, that I'm not sure. But whether Obama is a great strategist or not, he's benefiting from the lousy strategy of the Republicans. At least I will say that. So let me scroll through here and see what other questions I have. I'm already at about the 1 hour mark, but I'll go for an extra few minutes. Libre Vision Network asks, my question is, what be the best and worst case scenario of this government shutdown in the far and near future? Well, I mean, the best case scenario is that the Republicans hurt themselves enough that they lose the House of Representatives, but they don't go so far that they actually hurt the U.S. economy. That, I guess, would be the best case scenario for the near future. And, of course, the worst case scenario is that there are like this suicide caucus in the Republican Party that actually would rather tank the U.S. economy than have Obamacare go into effect or have anything successful from this president. And if that happens, well, I mean, it won't only hurt the Republican Party, it will also hurt Obama because it's his presidency, and if if there's another recession, he'll have some responsibility for that. But however much it hurts Obama, I think it will hurt the Republicans more. And I mean, so in the worst case scenario, Obama beats the Republicans, and in the best case scenario, Obama beats the Republicans. So it's hard for me to see a scenario where the Republicans beat Obama in this one. But there are various scenarios where the American people really get hurt, and so that's what I hope doesn't happen. Let me see. Let me see if I can find any more. Let's see. Simiols, who I just asked the first question, the business party has two factions, Democratic and Republicans. Well, there are definitely corporate parts of both the Republican and the Democratic Party, but remember that, I saw a couple Marco Rubio questions there, but I have to take a quick little drink. Remember that clip I showed from Alan Grayson and Bill Maher talking about how the Republican Party is actually being controlled by voters, not money, because the money would want them to raise the debt ceiling. The money would want them not to tank the economy. And that's something important to remember, that there is like a money primary where you have to do really well with the moneyed interests in order to be a candidate. But there is also a voter election, and so you have to get a majority of the votes. And if you can't do that, it doesn't matter what the money thinks or what the money wants. Now, the money does have an unfair advantage, but the voters do also have an influence. So there are corporate factions to both the Democratic and Republican Party, but then there are also voter factions. There are also the voter influence. So it's true, but it's not dispositive. There are two sides to that whole argument, and that's why I thought that clip I showed from Alan Grayson and Bill Maher. In fact, it was such a good clip. Maybe I will show it one more time before I go, just to make that point again. Replay a clip to make my point. Here it is.
I see it a little differently. I think there's really three Republican parties. There's the corporate shills, there are the religious fanatics, and then there are the freedom fiends, the ones who want to make sure that you have the right to sleep under a bridge.
So Jesus freaks, gun nuts, generic obese suburbanites, and let me add the super rich. That's the Republican Party, you say?
Yeah, and right now at this particular moment, the corporate shills are in the minority, and they can't force their will on the others anymore, because when you get down to it, they have the money, but the other two have the votes.
You know,
So yeah, I wanted to replay that clip one more time, and that's important for all my viewers who think that money controls politics. Money has a lot of influence, but votes also have influence. It's for a politician to be successful, he has to navigate that problematic route where he gets the support of the money and the voters, or at least the voters for the House of Representatives. A lot of them are in these safe districts where they have to get the voters of their party. They're Republican safe districts and Democratic safe districts. So they need to get the corporate or moneyed interests, and then they also need to get the base of the party to vote for them in their primaries, and that's what's keeping a lot of these Republicans siding with the Tea Party against business interests. So I wanted to make that point again really clearly. So I have time for one or two more questions. Justin Smith says, Ted Cruz is the only one winning out of all this mess. And I don't know. I think he may be winning in that same way I was just talking about, where he's winning with the base, but I think he may be hurting himself. And I said that last week. I think he may be hurting himself with the general electorate. If he's trying to run for president, which is what I think that's pretty clear, he may be helping himself get the Republican nomination, but hurting himself from actually winning a general election. So, let's see. Ninth Gate says NSA is undermanned at the moment. And I played that clip of Bill Maher talking about how the NSA was listening in on this woman this person trying to apply for Obamacare. I think he said it was a woman, and said Control-Alt-Delete, hit Control-Alt-Delete. I thought it was kind of funny, but there have been news stories about how a lot of intelligence and NSA analysts have been furloughed because of the shutdown, and they're stressed out, and I think they've been playing those stories because they're trying to say that the shutdown is increasing the chance of a terrorist attack, but I think at least in terms of national security and special forces, the Obama administration with these raids in Libya and Somalia have shown that, some people are still on the clock and getting paid, and that's still going on. So, let me see. Darren Kern says, doesn't LV do this every single Sunday at the same time? Yes. Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup is every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Thank you for letting me put in that plug. I'm kind of glad to see that I'm getting more and more viewers, or at least for the last several weeks they've been increasing. So I like to see that people are starting to see that I'm playing all these clips, and I'm pretty much at the end of the show here. So thank you all for joining me, and I'll be back next week for Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Also, if you haven't watched it, I put up one of my edited, produced videos just Saturday morning, and it was a Fox News bias video. I know I got a lot of feedback from people that they like the to see the shorter clips and the shorter videos. So here I'll put up the thumbnail, and if you're watching this as a recorded event, I will put a link in so you can watch my latest video. If you really do like the shorter videos and the produced edited videos, then go and watch it, and give it a thumbs up and add it to your favorites and share it on social media, because if you want me to keep making those videos that take longer than, this event takes me like 6 or 7 hours every Sunday of watching the shows and capturing and processing the clips and then doing this broadcast. But the shorter videos actually take more time. So if you want me to keep making those, please support them and share them and get them views so that they're worth the time and effort for me to make. And I'm going to end the show here for my fans who like to see Sandy. I've got Sandy here. Sandy, show yourself. And there's the cute puppy. And thank you all for joining me. I'm going to finish up the show. And it's been, I hope you enjoyed all the clips I picked for you. And have a good rest of your weekend for my U.S. viewers and for my viewers in Europe. I hope you have a good beginning of your week. Join me next week, Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup, 6:30 p.m. Pacific.